Zachary, it has been so encouraging to see you engage with the text of your Torah portion over these past weeks and months, and to hear you read it this morning with such expression and understanding, bringing out all those important parts. These early stories of Esau and Jacob capture our imagination. Isaac's pleading on behalf of Rebekah, who is unable to conceive, her discomfort and pain in pregnancy, the struggle between the two brothers in the womb, and the predictions given by God, the favoritism, jealousy, and deceit we witness in this family's life. It's a conflict that will endure for millennia, tragically emerging into history from these early mythic historical stories of our ancestor Jacob. Where do our sympathies lie in relation to the brothers? With Esau the hunter, the favorite of his father Isaac, or with the homespun Jacob, his mother's favorite child? Esau is naive and focused here only on the here and now, as you rightly said in your Devar Torah, Zachary. He's famished, he thinks only of his stomach. And Jacob takes advantage of his older twin's hunger for food. Jacob, as his name implies, Akev, he comes out holding the Akev, which is a pun on his name, the heel of his brother. Jacob himself is a heel, is calculating and deceitful, hungry in a different way for superiority, for recognition and dominance. The traditional Haftarah I mentioned that accompanies this week's parashah is from the prophet Malachi, who lived about the middle of the 5th century BCE. The prophet speaks of God's loving preference for Jacob, for which read the Jewish people, and in stark language of God's hatred for Esau, for which read Israel's arch enemies, the Edomites. Yet nowhere in the Torah does God speak about hating Esau. Malachi is reflecting the centuries-old tensions between the descendants of Esau and Jacob, the Edomites and the Israelites, enmity that begins in the womb and emerges onto the national stage in the book of Numbers, when the Edomites refused to allow the Israelites to pass through their territory and came out against them with a large and powerful army. However justified Malachi may feel in projecting onto God his defense of Israel on the one hand and his animosity towards Esau, Edom, on the other, we are forced to question the wisdom and justice of Malachi's language and the way in which this prophet creates a dangerous division between neighboring peoples. In her latest book, Doppelganger, Naomi Klein, the Canadian author and social activist, explores the phenomenon of the double self and what she calls partitioned narratives. The book was inspired by a conversation overheard by Klein in which two women confused her with another Naomi Wolf, a writer who increasingly has become known as a fantasist and conspiracist. Initially disturbed by this confusion, Naomi Klein eventually became curious about exploring more deeply what she calls the mirror world, a world of misinformation, conspiracy theories, and corruption. Here she reflects on how politics is now driven by warring camps. All of politics, she says, increasingly feels like a mirror world, with society split in two, and each side defining itself against the other. Whatever one says and believes, the other seems obliged to say and believe the exact opposite. The deeper I went, the more I noticed this phenomenon all around me. Individuals not guided by legible principles or beliefs, but acting as members of groups, playing yin to the other's yang, well versus weak, awake versus sheep. By the way, that is right, it's not sleep, it is sheep. I checked in 2 places. Righteous versus depraved, binaries where thinking once lived. Imagine another individual, Zachary, who shares your first name, but holds views that are diametrically opposite to yourself. You believe that it's wrong for athletes to enhance their performance by taking drugs. The other Zachary believes that such accusations against athletes or their trainers are conspiracies. You might be convinced that the planet is in the midst of a major climate catastrophe. Your doppelganger, the other Zachary, believes that it is all an orchestrated fantasy. To be confused with this other Zachary would, I imagine, make you feel angry and humiliated. You would want to eliminate any kind of association with your double, this intruder into your life. Naomi Klein's book, however, accepts that setting out to assert her separateness would simply draw attention to the areas of sameness and would further run the risk of cementing what she calls the unwanted association in people's minds. Her rage soon turned to curiosity about the concept of the doppelganger, the double walker, to translate from the German. The twin self, she writes, stands for our highest aspiration, the eternal soul, that ephemeral being that supposedly outlives the body. But it also represents the most repressed, depraved, and rejected parts of ourselves that we cannot bear to see, the evil twin, the shadow self, the anti-self, the Hyde to our Jekyll, the doppelganger as warning or harbinger. As I read more of Naomi Klein's doppelganger, I began to think of Esau and Jacob, the twins, and the way that our tradition from Malachi onwards into the rabbinic period and beyond created a deeply damaging binary split between the myrtle and the wild rosebush, between the conscientious student and the unruly truant, between persecuted and persecutor, between ourselves and the other, a split that was eventually reversed and taken over by the Christian church. Rabbinic midrashim associate the Edomites with Rome, Israel's occupier and oppressor. Then the doppelgangers were reversed when Tertullian was the first church father to state explicitly that it was Jacob who symbolized the church and Esau the Jews. And God's prophecy to Rebekah that the elder shall serve the younger was interpreted by the church to mean that Jews, representing the older religion, would serve the younger religion of Christianity. We can interpret Jacob's desire for the birthright, and later in this parashah his deception in stealing the blessing reserved for the elder son, as worthy of merit. Perhaps it is what he deserves as the quiet, homespun son, in contrast to the outdoor hunter who thinks only of his material needs. Or we can see how Jacob, in confronting his twin, is destabilized, how the core of his identity is challenged. Think of the episode in his life when he wrestles with a mysterious man at night, a man whom some commentators see as being Esau, Jacob's original doppelganger. For millennia, this story has taught us about how God inverted the natural order by choosing the younger son over the elder. For millennia, the story has been exploited in one way or another to create divisions between religions, races and nations, ideologies and politics, as we have pushed away the other from ourselves, or vice versa. Instead, perhaps we should learn from your parashah, Zachary, what happens when we confront ourselves. Let us not be so quick to draw our swords against what we perceive to be our nemesis, to darken the other, or to face the other with belligerent opposition. It was instructive to watch some of the moving and persuasive debate on the terminally ill adults' end-of-life bill, which passed its second reading in Parliament yesterday. It was a discussion conducted with dignity and respect, MPs able to listen to each other and acknowledge some of the complex and difficult issues, even if they disagreed. This is how we learn to become a more respectful, thoughtful, and harmonious society.